Get started. Planning Commission meeting. Reporting in progress. If there's an emergency here in person, you can go back to the room and easily down the hallways. Agenda changes. I would like to move number 5, the election of vice chair, to one week on. That's kind of what we've tried to do in the past. I know it's not good if there's agreement to do that. In a second.
Move to the next meeting.
Yes.
Hey, Paul, I can hear voices, but I cannot distinguish what people are saying.
All right. You want to keep, I just fixed a problem, so maybe try to keep going and see what happens.
Okay. Agenda item.
No, can you hear Sue?
I can hear, but not clearly. It sounds like people are 300 miles away.
Yeah, they sort of are.
Okay, to the public for item now. Anyone have anything out? What? Oh, yes.
That's been there. The cursor has been there, unfortunately.
Okay, we're proceeding. Announcements. So is in the agenda here that the second city council adopted the development regulations that we sent forward to them. They were unanimous, and I wrote down specifically thanks to us for this work. So passing that on to the group. Any other announcements?
I wanted to just announce, I read in the an article that I believe it's Minnesota has, Minneapolis has removed all R1 zoning from their zoning maps in their effort to address segregation and all the racial disparities in housing. One of the measures that they took, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the article, but I just thought that was interesting to note that they have banned R1 zoning. So.
Any other announcements? Okay, any commissioner meeting reports?
Yeah, our next meeting with them.
Can I just ask everybody to make sure you speak up doubly so, because this is the only input at the moment, just so.
Okay.
Well, we did have a subsequent to the when we spent a good deal of time talking about land use, natural areas, and the potential for the city to adopt an ordinance to what Burlington adopted last fall with respect to how new buildings are heated and whether that Burlington adopted an ordinance that the primary
Everyone's phone.
what? And so we spent a good deal.
Does he have his phone?
That's one
He doesn't.
hope that move that forward.
Actually, also sorry, that there was a VPR had a discussion about
oh, sorry.
In order to increase electric vehicle usage. They specifically talked about the challenges for people in multifamily buildings and that retrofitting buildings is very difficult and it's something to be mindful of. And I wanted to bring that up because as we talk about new buildings, I think it's something to keep in mind. So I wish I wrote down the date of it. I will share it with everybody. It was very informative.
Monday.
Was it Monday?
No,
Yeah.
Vermont.
Yeah, Vermont edition. So I also forgot to share it with everybody. I suggest listening to it. Very interesting.
That's fine. I think the option one I'm missing is older, like existing buildings. Because, you know, a lot of what we do applies to, you know, like new buildings. So, but, you know, having the information. We decided to skip 5 or move 5 to the next meeting. So number 6, receive and discuss recommendation from the airport rezoning task force. So, first of all, thank you all so much for all the work and the great reporting. I think many people from the task force are here. Do you want to identify yourself? Yeah, you should come on. Yeah, come on up. I talked to the mic.
Well, the airport rezoning task force was created at the behest of you, the planning commission, to assist you in evaluating requests made by Burlington International Airport to rezone parcel of land from residential R4 to airport care. The task force that was formed has a diverse group of representatives and perspectives. Those members are myself, Kim Robinson. I'm co-chair of the rezoning task force and a longtime Chamberlain neighborhood resident, and a member of the CNAPC task force in North Carolina. This is Carmen Sargent, who is co-chair of the task force.
An even longer time Chamberlain neighborhood resident and chair of the CNAPC task force and noise subcommittees. Isaac Bissell is a Chamberlain neighborhood resident. It's getting
Technology.
reverberating. Should I continue?
Just hang on one second.
No.
1 second.
You wanna hear some of the time,
Speaking of noise.
I think it's fixed now.
Oh, thank you. Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay. Isaac Bissell is a Chamberlain neighborhood resident as well and brought great passion and energy to our meetings.
I'm sorry.
Can you just check to see if people at home can hear?
Let's
before
just
we
make
continue?
sure everyone can hear you. So can someone at home hear us or Kim? I want to make sure we're.
I can hear Kim very clearly.
Wonderful.
Until she talked, I could not hear anyone from, if you face your board from the right-hand side of the board, I could hear Monica very clearly, but I could not hear anything that Andrew or anyone on the right-hand side of the board was saying.
Sue, that should be fixed now. We have the microphones now set up, so anyone.
Okay.
We'll turn them on.
Okay.
Thanks, Sue. Okay, thanks, Kim. Now we should all be able to hear you.
Great. So I'm Kim. This is Carmen Sargent. We're both members of the Chamberlain neighborhood. Isaac Bissell was also on the task force, is a Chamberlain neighborhood resident as well, and brought great passion and energy to our meetings. Going above and beyond, he organized a canvassing of the entire Chamberlain neighborhood to maximize the neighbors' awareness and input into the task force's deliberations. John Burton represented the Economic Development Committee. Paul Engels and Monica Otsby were our Planning Commission representatives, who were not only actively engaged in the discussions, but also helped the task force better understand how the commission works and how our recommendations might be utilized. Megan Emery represented the City Council and amazingly met with all the different contingents from the airport to help us broaden our understanding of the airport, how it is organized, and how different constituents envision the function and future of the Burlington International Airport. We were assisted by Kelsey Peterson, city planner, to keep us organized, follow norms, and moving forward sometimes. Brandy Saxton served as our consultant and was very responsive in providing background information, researching topics that came up in our discussions, and crafting the language of our final recommendations. We extend our gratitude to both of these women for their work and professionalism. The task force met 8 times over 5 months, and 2 of those meetings were public comment sessions. We were somewhat surprised, but gratified that there was a great deal of interest and strong support from the Chamberlain community. We heard from members of the general aviation and business community, but overwhelmingly, the Chamberlain residents wanted to be heard. As I mentioned before, a group of citizens canvassed the whole neighborhood and gave us feedback from their meetings with residents. The task force considered a great many ideas about how the rezoning could potentially work and weighed what the effects of different contingencies might have on the neighborhood. I will not enumerate for you what is stated in the recommendation, but I would like to emphasize that the recommendation to deny Burlington International Airport's rezoning request and retain the current R4 zoning was unanimously approved by the task force. The task force is confident that this is the best way to protect the Chamberlain neighborhood from further harm and to allow the residents to rebuild the sense of community that has been so damaged. I would like to say that one of the ideas that really allowed us to coalesce on our final agreement was the concept that the rezoning of this land would forever relinquish South Burlington's ability to utilize this land. What is true today is not necessarily true tomorrow. The fact that the Kirby cottages were deemed incompatible for residential living and then they were redesignated shows that changes can happen. When we discussed what a fast-changing world we live in with so many challenges that need to be addressed, we thought that there is no reason to believe that the airport will forever be expanding. Why the most densely populated part of Vermont could be deemed as inappropriate for the basing of the F-35s. Air travel may become cleaner, quieter, and eventually the noise lands could lose that title and again provide relatively affordable homes in a well-loved neighborhood that is still home to so many. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Anything else that
Well,
either of our members from the committee wanted to add? I don't,
no, I have to say that the report,
I meant Paul or Monica because they were on the
Oh.
committee first.
There's a part of the report that I really hope everybody read, and I'd like to just very quickly read one paragraph of it, because this is what really broke through to me. First of all, the points that Kim just made about Kirby Cottage, being deemed unlivable, and now all of a sudden it is because patterns change, and the fact that let's all hope that companies like Beta can be hugely successful and that maybe new technology can over time change noise levels. That was something that really stayed with me in this conversation. On page 4 of the document that we received with the final recommendation, it says, South Burlington is committed to the ongoing viability and vibrancy of the Chamberlain neighborhood with its local elementary school, central and walkable location, proximity to parks and green space, and some of the most affordable housing in the city. It has provided generations of residents an opportunity to purchase a home. It has an original missing middle neighborhood with a mix of modest single-family homes, duplexes, small apartment buildings, and condominiums. New residents are continuing to choose the Chamberlain neighborhood, and the local real estate and rental markets are strong. Given the severe housing crisis in the region, it is critical that the remaining housing and quality of life in the neighborhood be preserved. The character, convenience, choice, and affordability available in the Chamberlain neighborhood is not something that can be readily replaced with housing anywhere else in the city. And the other point that it makes is that this R4 zoning has been coexisting from the beginning of South Burlington zoning time with the airport. So I say again, given the importance of the affordability of this area and its vibrancy, in addition to the fact that it has always been next door to the airport, I think that it came through loud and clear to me that maintaining R4, including when we go forward with our comp plan and looking at this, I think is critically important to South Burlington.
I think the thing that was most outstanding for me was the neighbors that showed up and testified. And there's a strong feeling in the neighborhood that they have been ignored for years, back to the beginning of the demolition of the housing and then on the various airport plans. So it was great, I thought, to be a part of really allowing them to have a voice for the first time. There was an excellent report that was done in 2016 that has never really been implemented because it was completed 2 months after the last comprehensive plan. So it just, they missed out on where they needed to be. And I think it's really incumbent upon us to make sure that the Chamberlain neighborhood and the issues around the airport are paramount as we're developing the new comprehensive plan.
Great. And then, Michael, you had something you were going to say?
Yes, I'd just like to say that I attended a couple of the public hearings, and I'm struck with admiration for the professionalism and focus that this task force brought to the task they were given. And the report is comprehensive and extremely well written. So thank you.
Thank you.
And maybe I could take this opportunity to move that we accept the final report of the airport rezoning task force dated May the 3rd, 2022, to formally thank the task force for its work and to dissolve the task force as of today's date, May 10th, 2022. That's a motion on it. I'll second that motion.
Okay, seconded by Andrew. Any discussion on the motion?
So this was the motion to accept it, and then after that would be our discussion as to whether or not to, yeah, so I agree with that.
Okay, any discussion or should we, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That is unanimous. So a big thank you. And, you know, we do have some options as to how we might take possible action on the report and recommendations. So I don't know if there's questions or comments. Duncan?
Yeah, I did have a question on what our next step forward is. I do want to say I thank the task force for a lot of work. I was kind of on the fence with the zoning request, but after reading through the minutes of your meetings, it became pretty apparent that the folks in the Chamberlain neighborhood were pretty passionate about keeping the land the way it was. But I think the last paragraph in the report really kind of struck home for me, and especially the last sentence you guys put in there. The city should not approve piecemeal zoning rezoning requests for noise lands until such time that a clear, comprehensive policy guidance is in place. I think that's excellent guidance for us. So I guess that leads to what's our next step. Obviously, I think this is something that we probably need to address in our comp plan. But I'm not sure what would be our next step from here for this land.
Well, I guess there's a few recommendations in here, and I think it's up to us how and if we would move forward with some of these.
Yeah, I mean, one element that I would add to that, because I very much agree with that statement, that discussing it during comp plan will be important. And it seems to me that area, the strength of that R4 there, and whether something can, there are homes on certain areas right now or not, the future can once again see housing there. At the same time, while this was going on, coincidentally, we know that Beta's development kind of came into the news and they're making some progress there. I would like to ask when we get to comp plan time that we really look at that Williston Road area and see if there are more opportunities for such businesses in that area. It seems extremely appropriate. And if there's anything we can do to support the business community and the jobs market in connection with the airport there, that seems far more appropriate to me than trying to hammer it in. One of the things that somebody in the public meeting said, and I can't find her name, but it just made so much sense.
Yeah.
We are a small town. All of Vermont is a small town. And that this small town is trying to have a vibrant neighborhood, have a military base, and have a potentially, a big business base is very difficult. That's three things happening all in one very tiny space.
Hey, Paul, I am now hearing nothing.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Nick Longo. I am the Acting Director of Aviation at the Burlington International Airport. I'm here with my incredible leadership team, Dave Carmen, our Deputy Director of Aviation, Larry Lackey, our Director of Engineering, and Shelby Lozier, our Director of Ground Transportation. Thank you very much to the co-chairs of this task force for your role and leadership in this entire process, and for listening to our initial request. The amount of detailed material, I agree, is extensive. It's very important, and the amount of information provided by both the city staff, Kelsey and Paul, as well as the consultant, Brandy, was exceptional, and I sincerely appreciate that effort. Of course, there are many concepts throughout this entire task force process that were presented, many ideas. And I agree that a comprehensive idea should be presented by the airport for this particular area. The airport spent an extensive 2 years, an extensive amount of time on our master plan. And we now are seeing some of those concepts, some of those planning efforts come to fruition, like the Beta Technologies and other entities around the airport. One element to our request, not only within the master plan, but also within this initial preliminary concept of this rezoning area, was a new airport maintenance facility. This houses tens of millions of dollars worth of airfield equipment to operate that airfield. While our original concept and the master plan did detail this to be adjacent or right along that initial fence line or perimeter fence, we now are embarking on realigning this facility to be entirely within the airfield. Further, we have been granted preliminary approval, which was not originally our intent when we started this process, but we have been granted preliminary approval for the funding of that maintenance shop from the Federal Aviation Administration. I would like to start that design. I think it's incredibly important for the operations of our airport. My intention is not to circumvent this process, not to circumvent the rezoning and the efforts made by the task force. We want to, and we have heard that task force and the neighbors loud and clear. Later this year, I am hopeful to start the design and bring that design forward to the DRB for initial review. Again, within the airfield fence line in currently zoned air zoning. As I stated in the initial presentation to the task force, I also do want to create an open and inviting space for the neighborhood to use that property, to use all of that green space property. This green space is extremely important, as we've heard throughout the task force meetings, throughout many conversations with our neighbors and some of our business members as well, including those at the airport. It's so important, and it's so important to me and my team. We have already proposed an extensive landscaping master plan for not only across the street adjacent to the parking garage, and I'd like to carry that over to this area that was discussed within the task force meetings to encourage neighborhood accessibility, to continue encouraging accessibility. I want to move this forward quickly. I've asked city staff if we can build some of this area out early for the community, even before some of our projects on the table. Some of this will be, like I mentioned, will be across the street from the airport, the main airport parking garage, while some will be the land that we discussed within the task force meetings. I do want to commit this land to continued use, multi-use community recreational pathways and amenities for the neighbors, for these neighbors. Finally, I look forward to participating and understanding the 2024 comprehensive plan and incorporating some of the elements discussed in the task force to build that collaborative plan in this particular area. As the airport grows, which we are growing, as the airport grows, even after some of the most challenging years in aviation history, I would like to be prepared for a healthy, a sustainable, and a respectful growth in that area. In no way was our intention to grow into or towards that neighborhood, but we want that collaborative effort, and that task force allowed us to listen, to understand that much, much better. During this process, I'll also be working towards our own comprehensive planning efforts in that area, to draw back a little bit, to work within our existing footprint of the airport, to build and grow, again, respectfully within that fence line and existing zoned areas, and to redesign that initial concept so that there is some way to look at a future airport maintenance facility and possibly other smaller entities. This is your airport, and we are your neighbors too. And we have listened to your request. I'm excited about the future. I look forward and truly look forward to the continued effort working with this committee, the DRB, other task force in the future, and certainly city staff. And most importantly, the residents. Thank you very much. We heard the task force and truly respect the amount of work that went into this entire process. Thank you very much.
Very good, thank you. And thank you very much. That's quite convenient that everyone's agreeing. So I guess there are some possible actions. Is there anything that we want to kind of formalize this evening? It seems like many of the recommendations are specific to the comp plan.
There may be some people online who will.
Okay, yeah, it looks like somebody popped up. James?
Hello. So I really appreciate what Nick Longo just said. And it reminded me of perhaps making a suggestion as to consistent with so many of the things that people at the public hearings said, which was that there must be a way to lower the noise level of the airport and restore housing in the 44 acres that was on which houses, something like 150 to 200 houses were demolished. Now, it seems to me that that can be done according to the concepts that Nick Longo just enumerated. If with the cooperation and the listening and the hearing and working together, I really think it's possible for the community, the airport, the city of South Burlington, along with neighboring cities, especially if we have the cooperation of the airport and Nick Longo, to respectfully ask the Air Force and the Vermont Air National Guard to remove the F-35. That would make the noise in the airport neighborhood negligible, according to the Air Force, negligible. So a great part of those 44 acres could have housing rebuilt. And now that land is way more valuable. It's a way for the airport to make a huge killing monetarily if they can get that land restored to residential housing consistent with the zoning. So I think this is a huge possibility of win-win. Nothing will help that neighborhood more than silencing this fighter jet. And the way to do that is to put it in an area, to remove it, and let them do the training in an area that's remote from populated areas. They gave it a try. It's been here for 2.5 years, but that's enough. It didn't really work. People are suffering from this noise. This 115 decibel noise is not consistent with health, safety, and welfare. So it has to stop. And if Nick is true to his word, the thing we can all do is work together to get this removed to an area that's remote from populated areas, not in one of the most densely populated parts of South Burlington. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Anyone else joining us online wanted to make a comment? Yeah, if you do want to make a comment, you can turn your video on and unmute. Cynthia,
Hi.
go ahead. Hi.
Yes, I'm Cynthia McGew and I live on Limekiln Road in the senior living apartments on Limekiln Road. And I'm part of the Chamberlain neighborhood. And when I used to live on Golf Course Drive, I could hear the F-35s, but not as much as I can hear them now. And they disrupt me and all my neighbors in these apartments. One of my neighbors was woken up at 3 and 4 a.m. in the morning when they were flying in and out, going to Germany or something. And she went to AFib and had to go to the hospital. So I would like to say that I totally agree with what Jim has to say, and I would like them out of there to some other place where they aren't interfering with public health and safety.
Very good.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Cynthia. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, then commissioners, you look like you're going to say something.
Yes,
Go
I
ahead,
had a
Michael.
question about the draft motion, which to me, the language seems a bit strange and vague. And it certainly doesn't clearly convey the unanimous recommendation of the task force.
The third one
Which was
does.
that they recommended the planning commission deny the Burlington International Airport's rezoning request and retain the residential R4 zoning. So I would like to propose a different motion that reads: the planning commission. I move that the planning commission deny the Burlington International Airport request to rezone an 11-acre area near Airport Parkway and Kirby Road extension, which area shall remain residential R4 as currently zoned. That's a little more representative of what the task force has asked us to do.
I'd second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, I do have a question. I guess my question is, what are we, in terms of this entirety of land, are we talking about discussing it in the comp plan, or are we talking about just saying, no, we're not gonna do anything, we're just gonna leave it all R4? That's my question.
I think there might be two things we want to do. One is to be very specific about the request, because we
Yep.
do have a zoning request. So I think that is the piece that Michael's
Michael's talking about.
motion
Okay.
is addressing. And then there are other recommendations in the report that I think might be comp plan discussion items. So we might want to kind of address them as a second action item.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion about this whole area in the comp.
Okay, I wasn't clear on which.
Yeah.
what you were-
So Andrew?
It also sounds to me, based upon what Nick was saying, that there might be discussion between the neighborhood and the airport, and just might well resolve itself if we're lucky. So I guess I'm hopeful that those discussions will take place.
You know, I like what you said. I agree. And I think that would be wonderful. And I hope that does happen more and more. And I want the people of Chamberlain neighborhood to know from all of us that they're not alone, that it's not just on them, because I believe that the comp plan needs to very clearly, more clearly than it did the last time, cite the importance of that neighborhood to the entire city. That's our city, it's our neighborhood, and we all cherish it, whether we live there or not. And I think that we all need to make that very clear to everyone who lives there. And I, again, am one of Chamberlain School's biggest fans and congratulate Holly Rell on once again winning Magic Awards for being an amazing principal. So
It is my
hurrah,
neighborhood.
Chamberlain.
Very good. So any other discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Okay, and then, Duncan, we can follow up with kind of your thought about some of the other recommendations. I don't know, Paul, if you can bring those up and see. I think it may be us kind of circling back to those recommendations as part of a comp plan discussion.
And review that 2016
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah, the 2016 plan that Paul just referred to is something that was drawn up and missed the 2016 comp plan because of timing. And that's got a lot of very, very important and interesting information in it.
Well, I guess just as a question for staff, so I know we're making kind of the comp plan, work plan, and this was kind of a placeholder kind of topic in the last comp plan. Like, do you need us to make a motion to that effect, that we want to review that report and this report as part of our comp plan work? Or is that just something that we'll do?
I don't think we need a motion right now. What in the comp plan schedule that you're going to be looking at in detail in your next meeting in July, August, we're going to have you identify what are the important issues that were not addressed in the last comp plan or that have come up since the comp plan that you want to spend focused time on. So that will be a perfect time to do exactly this.
So one thing I would point out, at the time that that neighborhood commission was written in 2016, it was focused on, now that the airport is buying this land and taking these houses, what would you like to see instead, or, you know, to deal with that? But I think what that report did not have the opportunity to talk about, which I would like to encourage a discussion to have, is the restoration of housing ultimately, whether it be in 10 years, 50 years, 2 years. I think the fact that at that time, Kirby Cottage was to be torn and now it is once again lived in is an important element that our comp plan will need to address, and that neighborhood discussion wasn't focused on. So that's one point. And the other part is, I would really love to hear what other areas of the city, again, perhaps that Williston Road by where Beta's new thing is, what can we learn about other areas that are not impacting the residential neighborhood area that we can help make something greater happen? You know, I mean, people own their businesses where they have them, and that they'll do that. But are there other areas where we can help make a difference and a more vibrant opportunity for businesses and jobs pertaining to airport related issues in areas other than the Chamberlain neighborhood?
So to learn from this area.
Yes.
I think Monica has a very strong point, because there are parts along Williston Road and near the airport, which we should look at from a zoning standpoint. That might be, and I know we've talked about one or two near the corner of Airport Airport Road and Williston Road, the northwestern corner, that area we talked about before, and we never really got too far with it. But that's something we should bear in mind, that there's zoning opportunities that don't impact housing.
On that side too. Okay, great. Then anything else on this topic before we move on?
One other thing.
Yeah, Paul, go ahead.
Kim, you had that document you showed me one night, and you make sure that Kelsey or Paul gets that for our deliberations here too.
For the noise, yeah, the recommendations that we made with the noise subcommittee, Paul.
Yes, we have that, and I'd be happy to share it with the whole commission. It's also, I believe it's on our website, but if it's not, we'll make sure it is.
Okay,
And I'll
thanks.
make sure that all commissioners have it.
Great. Well, thank you all for such, and thank you all for such great work and the collaboration. I mean, this has been a really great process from my perspective. So thank you.
You learned a lot.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that impressed me the most about all of this was really residents participating in this process and feeling validated when we got to the end of it, and having an enormous amount of gratitude being shown by people that live in the neighborhood that somebody finally listened to them. So I think that's a good lesson to take from this. My point of view as somebody who worked on it. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you.
I'd also like to suggest as well. Definitely appreciative of to think in the direction of what you can do with the neighborhood. And there's lots of people who are willing to step up and would like to be partners with you when you're developing your own airport plans, and how we all work together. It's going to make everything better for all of us.
I was actually about to say exactly the same about Nick. Nick, really, we appreciate your constructive comments and attitude. It's really refreshing. And I speak for myself, can't speak for everybody, but I really appreciate what you've said tonight.
It feels like it's a good time for a fresh start. I think that's what's needed, really, to bring people around to build trust and some sort of a commitment to change that is going to enhance them as well as help you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.
Just very quick clarification. The final report of the Chamberlain Neighborhood Airport Planning Noise Subcommittee is a 4-page report that is in your packet. So
Oh,
you
yeah, I
should already
thought I
have a
saw it.
copy of that in the packet. There's a lot, there's a lot of pages there, but there are 4 pages. That is that.
Yeah.
It follows immediately after the
Yeah.
task force report.
Also a good memo from Brandy Saxon, who was our consultant about affordable housing. I thought that was the clearest I've ever seen it spelled out in one
Yes, I
page.
wish everyone would give
Yeah.
that an extra read. Mhm.
The noise one, I read it and I read it and I read it again. And I was like, this can't be the recommendation. This isn't what Paul said the recommendation was going to be. Because I saw those recommendations and I was like, this has nothing to do with the zoning. So
I think it turned out differently
yeah,
than we thought.
found the rest of it. Okay, well, I guess we can, you're welcome to stay, obviously. We have a riveting discussion on our priorities coming next here. So we're going to move on to item 7, our fiscal year 23 priorities and work plan. We started this discussion at our last meeting. Commissioners kind of brought forward some new items. We talked quite a bit about the large task of the comprehensive plan update for 2024. And we have kind of a draft table in our packet for consideration. And I guess before we get into discussion, Kelsey or Paul, did you have anything you wanted to start out with? Maybe how you see this working with the council kind of joint meeting? It wasn't super clear if we were going to talk about this with the council or.
Sure. So let me give just 2 minutes on that. So the council is, as they did last fall, going to be doing a joint session with the city staff leadership team sometime in June to look at all of the recommendations from the Planning Commission, all of the committees, the staff leadership, and as they did last fall, approve a council priorities for the coming full year. That will then come back. It will likely look fairly similar from the things that you have brought up, but there may be something that either you suggested that might make sense for another committee to work on, or a brilliant idea that another committee had, or that council had, or the leadership had, of saying, here's a really high priority for then you to, look at and integrate into your work plan. That same day, so that's the first half of the day. The idea is that in the second half of the day that the council would have a visioning session with you all to discuss the sort of, and we'll talk about this a little bit more at your next meeting, but to discuss the sort of that one page at the beginning of the comp plan that is, what is your vision, goals, priorities, to sort of set the table of what is, let's try to affirm the vision for South Burlington for the next comp plan, to give everybody guidance to say, let's work towards these things in everything that we do.
So numbers 7 and 8 in this agenda are the initial planning, they're the planning commission discussion of effectively the morning and the afternoon of what you would be then working collaboratively with the city council to solidify.
I believe that the poll went around earlier this week, and our city manager is working to find the date that works best for the most number of people.
I only had one date.
Oh, goodness.
I don't remember seeing that. Was that maybe? See, and I can't get into my Esperl. I can't get into my Esperl, so.
Okay. Did anybody else not get it? Because we'll get it to you. I also have an announcement about the Esperl accounts that it will be resolved tomorrow. So
I did have a comment about that doodle, and that a general one, and that June is just a difficult time for, not so much for me, but for families who, it's vacation time, kids are out of school. It's the only time that I will be able to see my children in Ottawa and Montreal and New York relatives. So that's why I tried everything, and the only date that worked for me is my grandson's birthday. But it's okay. I just wonder whether it was such a wise choice to choose the month of June to do this. I know it's difficult, but it's hard for everyone.
I think July, you went into vacation.
July would be worse.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was because of the fiscal year. I don't think they were looking.
No, that's true. Sandy, too.
Yeah.
Well, whether it's wise or not, it's what the doodle poll had on it. So until we hear otherwise, it might be one of those dates. So, so I guess we'll see. So, so just the first part of this is the fiscal year 23 priorities, which have been categorized by comp plan, regulatory items, and policy items. Generally on items that we were either partway through working on or that were brought up at our last meeting. And I think the idea is that we would, you know, in this meeting agenda item, come up with something that we're comfortable sending to the council for their review, and then kind of our joint discussion on it at that joint meeting. You know,
Again, just to be clear on the work plan priorities, the joint session is on the vision for the comp plan.
oh, this isn't part of it. I thought you said this item was. I thought, didn't Kelsey just say?
Yeah,
It was two pieces.
the
It was
morning
this.
discussion.
Right, but that's a council meeting. That's not a joint session.
Oh, we
You're
don't
all
get
welcome
to-
to come. It's open to the public, but it's not a joint session. The afternoon is the joint
Yeah,
session.
let me
It's from
clarify
3
this.
to 8, right?
Well, the second half is a joint visioning session. The first half is the council and staff leadership working through all of the priorities as submitted by
Right.
the
Okay.
What I meant to convey, which I'm realizing I didn't, was that the planning commission, you know, natural resources, energy, all these other committees are submitting priorities to city council. That morning session will be discussion of the submitted priorities. It won't be a joint discussion at
it's-
that point.
It's council discussion.
council's
With
discussion.
the staff leadership.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, like, so the doodle poll said something like 3 to 8 or 9 to 5 or whatever so the first half of whatever that time period is not actually really for us. That's for council to discuss this and we could watch.
I think that's
But we're
correct.
not like,
Right, there'll be public comment to it, but it's, yeah.
okay, so I did misspeak. I thought it was maybe a joint discussion, but. Well, so the action tonight is not different. The action tonight is to come up with something to give them for their discussion.
Well, we've got the Chamberlain Airport issue. Issue number 1.
Yeah, so
That's what I'm.
you just as I guess clarification and explanation. So we're looking at a table on page 81 of 96 of the packet. It's a Excel sheet that was exported to PDF. I have worked through the topics that staff recommends the planning commission prioritize in fiscal year 23. So that is actually 50 to 60%, and this is all in that memo, 50 to 60% is actually comp plan work, and that's the stuff at the beginning that's in green. Regulatory tasks, most of which, not all of which, are related to the functionality of the LDRs, a little bit of cleanup from the previous round in IZ, things like that. And then the third section is new or renewed policy topics, some of which, many of which were on the fiscal year 22 priorities list. There are a few that are slightly different or slightly modified because some progress was made or a new topic was raised, but that's roughly how it breaks down. There were some other priorities that were proposed or other priorities that were proposed in more detail by planning commissioners. That just recognizing how much time we have in fiscal year 23 and how much time the comp plan will need, just didn't make our recommended list at this point.
So the Chamberlain neighborhood missed the boat again.
No, no,
no.
Yeah, I don't-
So so what I think is that it's under the comp plan. We just said that it would be part of the comp plan review of policies and updating things that we're missing. So it's not, I mean, we can more specifically say including Chamberlain neighborhood if we needed
And the
to.
airport.
Maybe we
And
could,
the issues around the airport.
Well, I guess what I would say more broadly is in the next fiscal year, you will have to do the entire comp plan. You will need to be done by August of 2024. So the entirety of the comprehensive
23.
plan of everything that you want to put into it, including these sort of subcategories to just break it up a little bit, will be this coming year,
So the planning commission needs to be done by August of 2023.
2023, excuse me. yeah.
So a year and a month or so from now. Just to go through public hearing process and city council
That's
process
after that,
before
right.
February.
I think what Paul is suggesting, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we should add that consideration of the recommendations in that 2016 Chamberlain noise, I don't know the title, I can't remember, but should be included in this work plan. We should make sure that we don't overlook it, so we should write it in here.
Yeah, I mean, the current comp plan does say incorporate the recommendations of the committee, because the comp plan knew that the committee was ending. So that's a natural next step. I do think that in addition, I agree. And in addition to that, it's adding what other areas around the airport can also serve a better, fuller purpose.
And from staff perspective, I'm just speaking from Kelsey Peterson perspective. I can't speak for Paul, but that's absolutely fine to do that. I would recommend that something else needs to be pushed out.
No,
Well,
no, this
I
is
think
under the
we're-
comp
You're all
plan.
just talking about what goes in the next comp plan.
I don't think so. I don't think that's what Paul and Michael are
No?
talking about.
What?
Aren't you just talking about making sure all the recommendations go into the comp plan?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I
I
thought you were
think,
talking about acting on them in the next fiscal year.
no, so I
Acting on them
think,
to put them in the comprehensive
Got
plan.
it.
so I think just like under comp plan, you have the grayed out industrial zoning comprehensive, you have that particular topic called out and the climate change mitigation called out, I think just in recognition of all the work that was done and that we already know that it's an issue that's kind of not addressed well in the comp plan. I
Right.
agree with Paul. It makes sense to just have it as just a line item under the comp plan.
Yep, I misunderstood. I thought Paul was saying we need to be, that the commission needs to be taking action in the next fiscal year. No, okay.
Okay, yes, action, but the action is the comp plan. Just to be clear, it is action,
Action to implement.
right? But, okay, I just
Okay,
want to be 100% clear that everybody's saying the same thing.
I believe we are. Monica?
I have another topic that I think the full commission would be it would benefit all of us to learn about this as we prepare for the comp plan. And I discussed this with Jessica, who informed me that past comp plans used to have a statement about how the comp plan should manage to the grand list. It would specifically call out the grand list. I think it's important for us to maybe all understand how the comp plan used to refer to the grand list and how we might need to refer to it again. There is a education tax cost per pupil measure that may very well be approved. And if it does, it will have one of the most dramatic impacts to South Burlington as Act 60 did in the 90s. It's a very well-intended plan and it serves the greater good, but because of the demographics of South Burlington, we will be experiencing a potentially, if it passes, potentially significant tax increase. And while school budgets, all of that stuff is not our purview, and that's not my intention, I do think that it will have such a resounding impact on our community that we need to look at from a planning perspective. Are there things that we should be doing differently? Example, in the industrial zone, does it or does it not make sense to add housing based on what that does to the grand list? And if the planning commissions of the past used to have those conversations, because it was in the comp plan, I think it's time for us to consider adding that back in. So we can all learn from it. I think it would give us a very strong base. So I would encourage us to do that sooner. I don't know if it's inviting in some of our state representatives to kind of just update us on what's being discussed and understand how it can impact, how they will expect it to impact. It's not a 1-year change. This is a going forward significant change for South Burlington, potentially. So
Which is the significant change?
there is a cost per pupil education tax bill that's being discussed. And basically the intention is right now, school budgets are issued back to local communities based on a cost per pupil.
Yeah, I got it. And
You
I
know
think-
about the change?
No, but I get the gist that as the grand list gets bigger, the costs of running the community
No.
go up.
Nope.
And
It's not that.
and taxes go up.
No, it's not that at all. It's that communities that have more English second language and students with greater need, they will get a new calculation to count as like a 1.5 or a 2. So communities,
But you're talking about education taxes.
I'm sorry, education taxes. Yes, strictly education taxes, which is then has an impact on,
Yeah, but
So-
I think my point, while it might not be strictly relevant, we do have to deal with the fact that if we grow too fast and too much, we are going to face significant tax increases. And we don't have a kind of long-term endpoint in our planning. How big should South Burlington be? Should it be 50,000? Should it be 100,000 people? Should we have 15,000 homes? I mean, we don't know. We're just muddling along from year to year, stumbling into the future, which today, with the need for climate change mitigation, is not something we can afford to do. We need to plan for all of that.
So I guess I think that this is important, and there may even be other new laws and policies that have come into effect since the 2016. So I guess I'm wondering if kind of this discussion kind of falls under that targets, projections, and data category, where we like kind of identify things that have changed since the last comp plan, like if this law comes into effect, and then try to figure out how it might change things like the grand list or taxes, and if we need to make a change to the policies related to that. Because
who would help us figure out the best resources for that? Because we can't figure it out ourselves. We really need somebody to come in and I don't know that it's the Economic Development Committee necessarily. I feel like it's somebody who's really in the throes of I don't know if it was Martin Lalonde or right.
He would be the first
Yeah.
person. to come to mind.
Paul, did you have a thought on?
Just broadly, just going to agree that all this would fall under the identified data projection targets, other information that are needed. This is good timing for the next month and a half or so to identify the areas that you'd like some greater knowledge on moving forward.
Okay. So it sounds like maybe it's in that category, and that's one of the things that we've kind of pre-identified for more education.
What can I ask? What is the the target end date for the Climate Action Task Force? Like when would those recommendations be to?
It's supposed to be September this
Oh,
year.
Okay.
Yeah, there'll be a draft formal.
Okay, well, that seems like good timing. Action September. Okay. Any other thoughts or things that we could try to sneak in,
The
Andrew?
line under regulatory, I'm sorry. The first row under regulatory, where it says address specific public comments on draft LDRs. Is that supposed to be limited to the item in the description, or is that potentially broader than just what's in the description?
I think it was written to be the 4 lines. That are the 3 that are, the one that's listed and then the 3 that are blank underneath. Those were specific items that were called out in the fall approximately as things that were brought up by members of the public or other committees that were not addressed during IZ.
So as part of the public comment, like
Right.
us as the commissioner kind of.
So I could imagine adding a few more to that list.
Is anything in particular?
I think the requirement to do a master plan for someone that's not intending to develop a parcel in the SEQ is really burdensome. And it's something that should be discussed.
I think that's the second one.
Is that the second
that's
one?
This one. Yeah.
But well, maybe it's not written that well then. I think there's 2 questions there. I think the first is if someone just wants to not develop, just I want to give away half my land, that should be really easy. But second, someone may want to build a few homes and not, the whole, not a whole development. And I think the way the rules work now, correct if I'm wrong, Paul, they would have to put together a master plan to do that. And there was a lot of public comment that seems really burdensome.
With the carve out?
Well, it's kind of small. So, I mean, look, we can talk about that again. Possibly
You
if
said
it,
a couple houses. The carve out.
yeah, I mean, possibly if the carve out was useful.
So it sounds like you're suggesting like maybe adding a second piece of this to discussion to maybe set a threshold for when the master plan requirement would come into play. Some
That could
kind
be
of
a way to do
threshold.
it. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's interesting. There's probably if we all had a session talking about, reviewing the document that we issued before about the differences that different commissioners were concerned about. And Andrew, you weren't here then, so you'd have to add yours. Reviewing the concerns of the commissioners of this last round and going through those again. I mean, we haven't done that. We haven't done that with the city council. The city council had some additional comments. It's unclear it seems like if we're going to sit down and open that up, there's a lot to discuss. So I appreciate Andrew bringing that example forward, and I could certainly give a list of a number again, but it seems like that's reopening. So either are we reopening or are we not for the sake of the comp plan?
I just want to be clear. We're talking about something that's going to take up 25% of our time if we're lucky. Correct?
Yeah, all the regulatory kind of portion.
I just want to have everyone to have that view before we start shoveling stuff onto the list.
Well, it seems like, if we're having a conversation about the master plan, adding a small piece about the threshold seems like a reasonable part of that conversation.
It sounded to me like it relates to the minimum density potentially, which is what why the master plan was required. And so that's why I wonder if that's opening up a whole conversation, right? Because that's
Well, so what I was commenting on was someone that doesn't want to develop a whole neighborhood, right? And I think the observation was that they could develop a master plan, build a piece of the neighborhood in a clever way, and then kind of renew the master plan over and over and over and never really build. And that just process seems really awkward and cumbersome.
They don't have to renew.
They have to just do it once. Okay, but okay.
I thought
But
the
it
master
expires in
plan
10 years.
No, it just expires. Then nobody builds any. You don't build anymore. The whole idea was to ensure the clustering, I think is what Monica was
There might be
getting
another
at.
way to get at it, I guess.
We're gonna do that.
So you just let it expire and that's it.
Paul?
Just a suggestion, and I think I really appreciate how the group is being attentive to your total capacity over the next year. But as you identify things like, that might fall under the functional category, does the last line in the blue cover that? A little
Oh.
bit more generally, to just say functional issues, as opposed to a new debate over policy, something that you're finding is not working the way that you expected it to, or that it's, I don't know, that's just drawing your attention to that item there.
I mean, what's not on here, and I think this is where these kind of issues can and should come up again, as we talked about having, whether it's a subcommittee or whatever else, a group to, listen to things that come up at the DRB, thank you. That group, where are challenges, learning about what the parking lot situation with Beta, whatever it is, figuring out that doesn't relate to our new LDRs. But watching where we are seeing their hurdles happen and figuring out how can we watch that? What is happening out there that is creating difficulty with the new regulations? So I think that it would be really good to have something like that organized, so that as we get ready for the comp plan and get ready for that last one that you pointed out, Paul, we can know what people are struggling with.
So when we've had those task forces in the past, it's usually because we've already, or the DRB or the public or staff has kind of already identified that there's a group of issues that kind of need to be tackled. And then at that point, if we don't have capacity as a group to do it all together, then we've had a task force to kind of look at that group of issues that's been identified. I don't know. I think that does fall under that last item, that we can kind of identify how to deal with them at the time. I don't know that we need to in this moment say, we'll have a task force to do that, until we.
What
does
if
that-
we asked what if we informed the DRB that we are interested in hearing ongoing, just comment from them specific to the new LDRs that can inform us for going forward? Because they may be in every meeting, they may be, they're working with these and they're new. So if there is, can there be a process in which they can know that we are interested in the challenges specific to?
Just as a
Yeah.
quick point, Marla Keen, who's a staff person to the DRB, is in the same department as Paul and I. And these kinds of questions are same as the zoning administrator, when she sees permit applications come in, and when we see issues arising that have come up out of the new rules, those are things that we're flagging, both from administrative review, the DRB review, and then from our side, from planning commission. And so those are discussions that happen regularly on the staff side in the department. That doesn't mean you can't speak directly planning commission to DRB, but it is something, if we hear from the DRB or from the administrative review through the zoning administrator, that we have that capacity to bring that to you. Just for
I guess
clarification
I
about our
kind of
department.
expected that to be on our list. It's something that was specifically removed from the list. Is that a staff recommendation that we don't meet with the DRB? Because we had identified that that was something we wanted to do last year. Yeah, I mean, because I'm looking at last year's list. It says meet with DRB, annual meetings with DRB. So, but then it's not on the list in front of us. So is
I
it an
guess what I would
active
say is that I don't want to speak for the board, but what has been relayed to us is that they're feeling pretty good about their ability to communicate through Marla to what the issues are, and are sort of wrestling with their own sort of very heavy workload that is going on at the moment. And so sort of wrestling with, they appreciate that they've got a way to communicate with you. And, we can be nimble if something arises and there's a desire to have a joint meeting, it's a meeting.
Do you know what would
But
be,
that it didn't necessarily need to rise to the being on a
Okay.
work plan as a formal item.
what might be really helpful and easy, because are you at at all of the DRB meetings?
No.
No. But what might be really helpful is just at each, every time there's a staff update, just some kind of, if anything came up in the last DRB meeting that dealt with the new LDRs, a quick, this one came up, it used this, it worked well, it didn't work well, it could be a quick, one-liner update, because it would have happened just the week before our meeting. And that would just give us an ongoing, like, okay, check, they had a great week with the new LDRs, no problems. Oh, they had a tough meeting with the LDRs. Without getting into a lot of the details of it, just kind of raising some flags for us on a regular basis, that could be.
Yeah, let us think about how we can most effectively do that. I really like the idea of it. As I'm sure you know, the DRB deals in very precise applications of a interpretation of a broad set of rules. And so I would want to be careful not to have, the DRB had one experience with this rule from one application, that necessarily means that that's how it gets applied for every other circumstance. The challenge of the DRB is that every case is different, but finding some way to share what they're broadly finding, absolutely. And same thing for the zoning administrator.
Yeah, I mean, if you're probably keeping a tabulation of things that the DRB or Marla has brought you that will require LDR changes at some point.
Or at least a consideration of them from you. Yeah.
Yeah, those are the things that I'm assuming Monica is interested in knowing about in advance, so that when we get to it, we've been primed.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and I think if it's easier to not lose track of them, to collect a few over multiple months, that's fine too.
This is not on point, but for later on, I wonder if we could get a version of this chart that we can make comments on for our next meeting. Add a column and then each, because doing this on the fly,
Well,
we're hitting some of the points, but I'm sure we're going to miss some, and it would be nice to be able to have something that staff can look at before next meeting.
So I think that's why we tried to talk about it our last meeting, and then this was the new version.
Yeah.
Are you saying you're not comfortable to move
Well,
forward?
I have, for example, I have a question about, where we talk about how to include something in regulations, adopt regulations. Are we going to be drafting? It's a question I have. Will we be drafting regulations as required by what we decide to do here? Or is that something that will come later after the comprehensive plan is complete?
I think the last column tries to identify the actions completable in this year for the coming year. Did you have a specific one that you didn't like the action?
Yeah, I'm sure there are a lot. I mean, just in reviewing the recommendations of the Climate Action Task Force, there'll be tons of things that we would want to, I would expect we'll include in the comprehensive plan, the 2024 plan.
Or potentially in the regulations.
And then.
Yeah. So I think it would say during this coming year, they would go into the comp plan to then maybe start with LDR or other changes that following year, like to get them into the comp plan, because most of our work is the comp plan this year. Is that, which I think this kind of reflects with some ongoing movement on other items. So So I guess unless people have like specific items, it'd be helpful to move this forward tonight so that we can move on to the other items at our next meeting.
Can I,
Monica?
so I was trying to look at this and look at the other email that had the next 3 meetings in it. And I noticed that this one does not have, it doesn't get into the details of like the TDR stuff that we're trying to wrap up. And the reason, unless I missed it, and the reason I bring that one up is because I was so grateful in the last meeting when Andrew caught the wave with me on concern about ensuring wherever we do it, whether it's in TDR or underlying zoning or whatever, the need to diversify apartment number of bedroom size as an example. Right? Multiple unit size. So I'm just wondering where that fits in here because I do have some concerns about the TDR plan, which I know is our next meeting, and I appreciate that having that, but I didn't see, obviously we want to resolve the TDR and see it kind of successful.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is helpful, but this is the list of priorities for fiscal year 23 that would be for work starting in July. So things that are still going to be worked on in May and June would still be following under the previous work plan. So anything that we're hoping to resolve in the next 2 to 4 meetings doesn't necessarily have to make it onto this priorities plan, because this is what would be going to city council for city council to then discuss and hopefully approve and bring back to you at the end of June.
That said, if to your point, or in addition to that, if you would like to be pursuing something about a variety of housing forms and you don't think it's going to be done in the next 2 meetings, then that is the kind of thing to contemplate putting in here. And we would also challenge to say we believe this is a pretty packed work plan for a year, so just contemplating what kinds of, if you think that's a substantial discussion, what kinds of things don't make the list.
And if the last line in the comprehensive plan section, I consolidated a few different housing needs related examinations and discussions into a single line. It doesn't specifically call out everything that has been raised by the Planning Commission, but it is written broadly enough that that discussion in the context of putting that kind of policy into the comp plan could fall under that line item. If it's something that you want to amend the LDRs in October of this year, that item doesn't quite cover it, but if it's for inclusion as a policy item in the comprehensive plan, it would.
Well, I don't want to take it off path here, but I was going to bring up in the TDR meeting that I have comments on that, and I would like a sidecar LDR that incorporates the unit diversification, but we can bring that up in the next meeting. I guess it's just.
Yeah, because it was
so I
actually
guess it doesn't
something we
go
talked
here.
about
I'll
as
just,
part of the meeting, so.
okay. But July is the start date and that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Are we comfortable with?
I guess here's a question. So just, I'm going to use this only as an example because like the whole ownership thing, which everyone knows I'm big on. There was a comment that that's going to be a bigger conversation with city council or with something. That's going to be a bigger conversation, perhaps beyond the planning commission. Is there an area in here where I mean, maybe that falls into the targets, projections, and data, and that we're going to be briefed on like things like that, the bigger conversations that are happening policy-wise that will impact us.
Can that be under housing policy?
Well, that,
What you're talking about for the club?
but that's us. It's not saying like if there's some.
I think a lot of the things under the comp plan, although they're not highlighted in gray, are going to have interactions with other committees in the council.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah. So
Yeah,
I
but
think we
beyond
don't
that-
need to
Yeah, but that the city.
I don't think we
council-
need to identify which ones of those in this moment that are going to be like bigger discussions with multiple committees.
Okay, so that, but anything in the green area, it would be including other resources as appropriate. Okay.
The understanding is that anything related to the comp plan would be involving staff departments, other advisory committees, city management, city council, as needed to get feedback and task examinations out and get reports back and all of that kind of back and forth communication across the city. The things that I highlighted in the darker gray are the tasks that I saw as being, you know, fairly discrete packages that could go to another committee for recommendation to come back. But those sort of ongoing communications about comp plan topics, I think are incorporated in anything listed as comp plan.
And just to add to that, you know, a big point of why this is all going to council is these become the citywide priorities. And so as a citywide priority, whether we're talking about a parks master plan or solar requirement on new buildings or whatever it is, there may be a role to play for many entities in support of these broad, this whole umbrella of actions that the city is advancing all together as one, you know, one big boat that we're all rowing together.
Mhm. We had discussed and we put in a request for a grant for and discussed going to the Bike and Ped Committee to specifically talk about bike safety in the urban overlay district. Is that, I don't think the Bike Ped Committee received that request from us yet, but is that reflected in here? Would that be part of comp plan somehow? I think that we had a discussion that as we're looking to increase the amount of residential density in that area,
Would be
that
in the comp plan under, right at the beginning, where we talk about this being a bike and pedestrian friendly community. So yeah, would be in there.
okay, that will, so that would be part of what they'd be briefed on to.
Duncan?
One other thing, and I think myself and Bernie, who's not here anymore, were the only ones in favor, but the east-west connections that we talked about, I know we did not go forward with funding for that. Would that be under updates to city center form-based code and official map, or is that something that's just completely been kicked down the road? You know, we talked about it, we didn't decide to move forward and ask funding for it, but we sort of kicked that one down the road quite a few times.
Yeah. Duncan, there was a long discussion about it, and I think
I know we decided
we
not
couldn't
to fund it,
all
but-
get our heads around whether this is a good thing to plan for because it's car centric, or not a good thing to plan for because it's car centric. And you know, shouldn't we focus on other transportation opportunities or modes that fit with climate change mitigation? That's certainly was my view at the time.
I think it's not specifically on here.
Mm-hmm.
And can I comment? I don't actually recall that part of the conversation, Michael, when we were discussing it before. However, I know that, and maybe this is a natural part, I have not been involved with the comp plan review before. Will we be briefed by the fire department on their safety concerns with any lack of, because at least if we are aware of that, you know, we haven't talked to them since we've changed the official map. And would there be an opportunity for us? I just feel like we have been in a information, you know, except for Arrowwood and public comment and working with our PUDs, we have just been so insulated. And I really feel like we all need to be just kind of inundated with information and hearing from our city crews about any safety concerns they have or anything like that, that could pertain to cross connections, I think would be a very helpful part of us preparing for comp plan.
Yeah, Andrew?
So I just have a question about process. So there are likely to be certain recommendations from the task force that kind of given the urgency of the crisis would require us to be pretty nimble in adopting. And so just a question for Paul, for instance, the ordinance, the Burlington ordinance, would that have to come first if we were to consider it through the planning commission and then onto the council?
If it's an ordinance and not a zoning regulation, that's council directly. They could say, planning commission, you
Yeah.
guys are the best served to actually review this. Please do it for us.
Yeah.
But it does not legally have to start with you.
Okay. I just want to leave room on this work plan to be nimble, to potentially consider regulatory outcomes with respect to the task force recommendations, in parallel or even prior to incorporation in the comp plan.
I agree. I agree with that. That's why I was asking when it was going to be done, because I think the sooner
Yeah.
we have, even if we have like some preliminary, like, this is a very, very strong indication that,
we'll
I
have
think
something
that
like
would be
that in
very
a few
helpful.
weeks. Yeah.
Okay.
You could potentially broaden the one that says solar requirement on new buildings to be a little bit more broad to describe, as you're saying, Andrew, be nimble. I just ask again, just being mindful that there are some really big, really important, but also complex matters that the Climate Action Task Force is bringing forward. So thinking about your total time, you may have to also be nimble to say something else on this list doesn't make it in a 12-month period, which is fine. I just want you to be all sort of considering
Well, I think
that.
I think we need to at least add receiving the report and like having some kind of discussion that I don't think is maybe only under the comp plan. I mean, there might be a few things that could get redirected to maybe identified for a grant or identified as something for the next year work plan. Like, I think there might be at least some time for us to like divvy up what comes out of review a report and figure out what to do with it. Does that need to be, like, even if we're maybe not adopting something, I don't know what the plan is gonna have in it, but
Yeah, I
it
guess.
does seem like that needs to be on here.
Yeah,
like
I mean, there's the box where it says review the recommendations from the task force, adopt regulations. I guess that's in a funny place under the comp plan. That box could really just be moved down a couple of rows. And I think it would be,
Right, because in
It
the
would all
comp plan, we're
read
not adopting
more properly.
regulations. So,
Exactly,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. You're right, because it is all on there
Mhm.
under comp plan,
Yeah.
although there could be an action or a next step that's maybe.
Move it into regulatory.
yeah, just move that. So there's kind of two rows for climate change. One is in the comp plan and the second is in the regulatory row.
I mean, I assume, to your point, climate change mitigation is going to be incorporated throughout the entire comp plan. So I don't even know if it belongs up there at all. It's
I
going to
wouldn't
have to
remove
be.
it from there.
Yeah.
I mean,
think
I'm
there's-
just saying, it seems like it's logically going to be something we have to check every section against.
Okay, well,
So
maybe this is even enough here, it specifically says review and incorporate, make a plan.
Yeah, it's just the one box, the middle box seems like it's maybe more properly a couple of rows lower.
So based on what you guys are discussing, do you foresee, and maybe Paul, this is a question for you, do you foresee us being like we were just briefed on this airport task force? Do you see us being briefed on the task force and then maybe having to reserve a meeting to discuss some specifics and perhaps, craft LDRs that we then hold public hearings for? I mean, do you see that being part of a specific time period? Because if so, that would be.
Yeah, I mean,
good
I
to-
guess I would broadly say that it that what the task force is developing is a it's a big ensemble of recommendations in order to meet the goals set by council, the state, the Paris Accord, that will touch all areas of city governance, including the work of the planning commission. So I think, we would recommend that it be called out specifically in the comp plan, because I think it is a significant subject area.
Be a chapter on its own.
Well, you had discussed a couple months ago saying that it really maybe shouldn't be a chapter on its own and just be embedded throughout as a weaving throughout, but you all can decide what you want to do with that. In terms of regulations, that's I think it'll be more than just one meeting that you're getting briefed on, I guess, on the subject. The council will get the formal report. I imagine you will also get a presentation on it, and how you choose to go about integrating into the comp plan, and then what actions you want to take. Maybe some of that should rise to the regulatory level this year. Again, you could broaden the solar requirement on new buildings. And I'm going to say it for the third time tonight, just caveat it with, if you're going to be looking at regulatory solutions, those are never very, very fast things. So you may have to look at what else comes off the list.
And just as a point of clarification about why it was placed in the comp plan section, the description in the middle box is the description of the project sort of in a longer term sense, in a 3 to 5 years, past the next fiscal year. It was placed in the comp plan section because the primary task in the next fiscal year, as I saw it, which you can disagree with and I can move it, is that the incorporation of recommendations into the comp plan was the biggest task for the planning commission the biggest thing for the planning commission to do with that report in fiscal year 23. So the bigger project is comp plan, it's policy, it's regulatory. It can land in all of those places at different points in time. I just placed it in comp plan because that's the biggest chunk of work in this coming fiscal year.
Can we maybe change the action to then also just say, consider regulatory actions, just because we might get to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's low hanging fruit that we can act quickly on, like, why not? That seems like a regulatory goal.
Yeah, it feels like it might not need to be double, like it might not to be need to be listed up in the green and down in the pink or whatever. Mine's.
You know what where I differ
Already
there?
should be.
Yeah, where
So
I would
maybe
differ
we-
there is that we always remind the public that the comp plan is not a regulatory document, it's a goal. And I think that there may be specific regulatory action. So I think it's worth raising
No,
it differently.
I was just going to say, if we are going to get the report from the Climate Action Task Force and then have to digest it, which obviously we are, and then if we're going to want to take some regulatory actions, that's going to take time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to take, my experience has been that regulatory actions are going to take a lot of time. So I think we
owe it to our children.
No, Andrew, I'm not, don't get me wrong. I want to go back and just say, let's not bite off more than we can chew here. I think we really may have to look at some of the other stuff and go, okay, if we're going to do all that stuff, then we're going to have to look at some of the stuff and go, this isn't going to make the cut.
Yep.
Well,
I think we need, I think we need to be realistic about what we can do.
And I think Andrew being on that committee can bring back to the task force that, it would be very efficient to, in their final proposal, identify low-hanging fruit that can be moved on more quickly. That would make executing it, to Duncan's point, much more efficient. So that would be wonderful if somebody happened to hear that's on the task force and could.
Yeah.
So I think what we're hearing is add something into the regulatory or policy section that specifically speaks to implementing. Is there anything that you would like to today consider taking off your list? Have to ask the question.
be the general official map stuff, like in the regulatory. You know how it's.
Well, and I'll have to say, the other thing I didn't see specifically on here, although maybe it's tied to form-based code, is anything we can do to help make the U-Mall the most amazing place ever. If there's anything we can do, please give us time to, I'm not sure anything is in our purview relating to that, but if there's
Yeah.
anything.
There are things on here that I would assume other committees will do for us, or like Parks Master Plan. Why do we should receive that from
That's why it's gray.
Recreation and Parks. And I'm sure there are a few other things that, because Duncan has asked, what can we chop?
Well, a quick question for you, Paul. I mean, we had the form-based code subcommittee. Would it make sense to start something like that again, to take that off the planning commission? I mean, I'm just thinking.
Yes, but that still keeps it on the planning commission.
But to lessen the burden for us.
Yes, I mean, it's
yeah.
a way to potentially grow the pot, I guess is the way I would say it. I
Yeah,
wouldn't take it off the list, but it's a way to potentially
Potentially.
grow the pot by creating a subcommittee, as you did with the airport group. We have to, at the staff end, figure out how to resource something like that,
Mhm.
which, that's fair. And if that's, a big priority for the commission to also do, which I fully support, always doing things in city center, being nimble there.
I mean, I would go ahead. Oh, never mind, that's comp plan.
Well,
Mm.
I guess my feeling is that we're going to be we're going to be receiving the report. We're going to be identifying where it goes into the comp plan. I feel like the task for this year with the climate action is to make a plan for how it's going to, like how those tasks are going to move forward. But, you're right. We might not just with the number of months get to like a whole lot of implementation. So maybe it's like an item where we're kind of like reviewing and making a plan for those next steps. Because we're only talking about like a finite number of meetings between when we get the report and what the end of this fiscal year is going to be over.
What more will we have to do with the I-89 bridge connections, do you think, really?
That's the big project that you sought the funding for over the winter, that you asked the RPC for the connections on either side, and you asked to do a land use interaction as to how that might interact with the
That's
form-based code.
our request. Okay.
Right.
Because they're not actually going to be.
It's not the I-89
Not-
project itself, it's how it lands and connects into the rest of our network. And a lot of that can be not necessarily the planning commission, but you did ask for it to also have a land use component of revisiting the form-based code to see is there ways to make where it arrives really supportive of it. So that's
And that would be useful to the U-Mall project, most likely.
Jessica,
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
I'd like to resurrect some of the work that was done in 2012 and 2013 on form-based code. I think it would be informative. A lot of the work has been done for citywide form-based code, and certainly did the work for city center, which is a much larger area actually than city center. It includes the mall and includes Staples, most of Williston Road. So I'd like to see if we could take a look at that material. I think it might save us a lot of work because I think the work's already been done.
Do you see that as part of the comp plan process, or are you talking about mainly around the mall, the area that Monica was just talking about?
Well, any of the form-based code issues that come up, I think.
Mhm.
Certainly the mall being part of form-based code is one of them. Yeah. And we also did look at using form-based code citywide.
that could potentially tie into a review for comp plan of, again, around the airport area on Williston Road, if there are better opportunities. So maybe this,
I just notice from time to time sitting here that there are things that are problems that really don't need to be problems. I mean, that whole issue with data technology, I don't think with form-based code, that wouldn't have been a problem. The people that came and talked to us, right? Or no, that was, who was that?
The technology park people.
Roland Groneman?
No, the
On
logic, on logic, the on logic people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that wasn't Tech Park. Okay, are we nearing ready to adopt this?
We need a motion to pass this on to the city council
with the,
With what?
what did we say we were doing about the climate change piece,
You
though?
get the
Are we
idea
leaving it
that we
as
get to
is?
do all the work, right?
With the edits, the two that I wrote down that seemed like there was agreement on was adding the Chamberlain area recommendations to the comp plan work as a separate line item. And then adding the climate action work as a separate line item under the policy. And then some of the, yeah, as an additional line item. And then a lot of the other things we talked about are kind of incorporated into some of the reviews that we have already on here.
How would we communicate to the council these few regulatory issues that we've discussed that we might want to do now, not wait, as Kelsey said, 3 to 5 years, because we cannot. But how would we communicate that to the council as part of this plan that we want? We talked about the ordinance that Burlington has passed on fossil fuel usage for heating or powering buildings. And there was one other which I've now forgotten. But in as a general question, the things that we would like to the regulatory things that we would like to achieve concurrently with the work we're doing on the comp plan, how would we inform the council about those?
Well, I think first, per your recommendation, going to add, or per your request, going to add an item that is a policy action. And then I think, depending on what the tool is, I would imagine that there's going to be a lot of communication over the next year between the Planning Commission and the council on the climate change issues. And so opportunities to divvy up work will abound.
Yeah. Yeah, Duncan, were you making one?
All right. I would make a motion that we approve and pass on the work plan for fiscal year 23 with the aforementioned notations added to the city council.
Okay, any more discussion from anyone?
Second?
You did second.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any
what-
discussion?
Nope.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Oh, great, unanimous. So we can move forward on to the bigger visioning. So I know that this was probably frustrating to all of us that we only have so much time in the next year, but what is very exciting about the next year is that we're making a plan for the future, which is a little different than all the work we've been doing for the last many years implementing the current comp plan. So we wanted to start out with a little bit of a discussion at a higher level about some policy challenges we thought we'd see coming up, which might help frame our discussion about kind of the bigger goals and what goes into the comp plan. Kelsey, did you have anything you wanted to say first, or?
No, I think what I wanted to say is in the memo that was sent out with the agenda. I posed 2 questions. What are the biggest policy challenges facing South Burlington in the coming decade? That's roughly framing with the comp plan timescale. And what is the planning commission's role in addressing those challenges? And I had just framed it in the memo as it would be, I think, illuminating for each commissioner to have an opportunity to answer those 2 questions. Either everybody answers one and then everybody answers 2, or everybody sort of makes comment on both. Just, I'm not sure why I'm echoing, but to set up that bigger, like very, very big picture, very broad picture of where the commission wants to be going policy wise. And then that discussion would lead into a discussion of the 4 visions and goal statements that were in the 2016 comp plan. And if the commission wanted to reaffirm those as values for the direction of the city into the 2024 comp plan. From the comp plan perspective, and I'm probably getting ahead of the discussion now, but from the comp plan perspective, everything is built up from these overarching visions and goal statements. So having the planning commission re-examine and reaffirm those, and then that would also be part of that discussion with the city council in the second half of their workday, so that everybody's on the same page with the same foundation as the comp plan really gets underway. So it's sort of a 2-phase thing. Big vision and goals untied to the comp plan questions, and then speaking specifically to those 4 statements.
So it looks like, I'm just referring back to our bigger schedule. So it looks like we do maybe have some time at our next meeting. If we can't get to the point where we affirm the 4 goals tonight, we
Absolutely.
we can at least kind of have the first part of that conversation, knowing that the goal is then to like really get into those 4 goals. So so there's, of the 2 questions, do people want to talk about each talk about the first one first and then circle back to the second one? Or are you prepared to talk about both at the same time? And does anyone want to go first?
Wait, where are the questions?
They're page 5 of the memo in the, under item 8.
All right.
Okay, I can read them once I find it says, what are the biggest policy challenges facing South Burlington in the coming decade? And then as a secondary question, what is the Planning Commission's role in addressing those challenges? Part of why I thought it would be nice to just segue straight into this is that, I think everyone had presented some great ideas as part of their lists. I mean, Andrew's got it here in front of him, our list of things we thought were important that maybe didn't fit into like the kind of tight schedule of the fiscal year 23, but they're big policy challenges that people have identified. So
Start down here.
go ahead, Paul.
So I think climate change, I'm looking forward to the climate change task force and how we can react locally, what we can do in South Burlington. I think that's really, and the question 2, I don't know if we're going to do question 2 also, but
If you want to.
Sure. I mean, as the planning commission, I mean, we're actually the statutory group, statutory organization to really lead any kind of environmental or climate change action. Certainly with the approval of the city council, but I mean, we're going to have to do the work on it.
Great. Michael?
Well, I would also say that the policy challenges are creating the regulatory environment that implements climate action mitigation measures that the Climate Action Task Force will recommend. But I can't say it's in the coming decade because I don't know about the rest of you, but I'll sure be gone by then.
Hey.
We're in a hurry. I'm
We're
in a
going.
hurry.
You're in a hurry to be done? Come on.
Yeah, I'm in a hurry to get something done before.
He's got to go
Okay,
visit the
okay. You're not in a hurry to be done. You're in a hurry to get something done. I see.
So, and one of the challenges that I think is not new, it's something I've felt since becoming a commissioner, is that we don't have a way, a method to do things really, really fast when we need to. We've done it just once, and that is, well, the general PUD. And I think that should be the modus operandi going forward. We need to be much quicker in getting our land use regulations done and enforced. That will affect what I said in answer to the first question as well. I didn't mean to be facetious about it, but we're all in a hurry because our livelihood and well-being of our children and grandchildren depend on what we do now.
Yes, I agree with that. So this is a big question. There's a lot of big things that are going to affect South Burlington, Vermont, the world, that are in tension, right? So South Burlington and Vermont is a great place to live for lots of reasons. And I think we're going to see tremendous pressure of people wanting to live here. I personally have family that have already climate migrated, and others that are talking about climate migrating to the Northeast because it's the kind of most stable place, I think, in the country, one of the most stable places. And we're going to have to resolve that influx, right, against the desire to keep this place a great place to live, right? There's a lot of tension there. And doing that all in the context of climate change mitigation, which is the from my perspective, kind of overarching thing we need to be worried about. And how do we resolve all those tensions? Those are really hard. My personal perspective is, I think, consistent with a lot of smart growth things that I've read, to, make our downtown, our city center, our transit overlay really great, robust, walkable, bikeable, vibrant, mixed residential, commercial, carbon efficient neighborhoods, and conserve everything else to the extent we can and accept as required by law. And that's, in my mind, the best way to ensure we've mitigated what's going to come. Wildlife is going to have to migrate. Flora is going to have to migrate. We're going to see increasing rains, and we're going to need increasing buffers, and we're going to have increasing stress on the lake. And I think we need to conserve as much natural space as we can while building great communities that people can have, great, great vibrant neighborhoods. And there's a lot of tension there, but I think we can do it.
Sounds like a vision. Should I go, or you guys want to go? So I wrote down that we've done a lot of work in the last couple years on like specific resources, but we haven't spent any time or very little time on parks and program spaces that are gonna kind of support those downtown areas. We'll also keep pushing views to the side. And I think that, if we are living in denser downtown areas, like having open space and views and programmed space, as much as I'm a habitat restorationist, I think that that's been a piece we haven't focused on as much, the program spaces. And it's really important for the ongoing quality of life. I also wrote down that we really need to consider how and where our growth occurs, maybe with form-based code elements expanded, Paul brought up. And, as someone who deals with hazard mitigation and flooding communities all the time. You know, I think a focus on resiliency for hazard mitigation and water quality is really important as we see higher storms, larger, more frequent storms, as well as weathering the droughts, which seem to crop up just as often as the floods these days. So, you know, I think there's still a lot of goals in the comprehensive plan from 2016 that are still valid that we haven't accomplished yet. And I think as part of our process, I hope that we can be open, transparent, inclusive in our comp plan process and really listen, consider, and learn. You know, I think that builds on kind of one of the things that Monica was saying about getting a lot of information. I think that, you know, as we've been implementing policies, we haven't been doing as much learning and listening as I think we could and is important in the comp plan process.
So something really, I have children in their 20s, children, and right, twice my height. And, you know, we frequently also come across information, this came from Market Watch, you know, but Vermont is, and I'm not saying this, I left being the liaison to the Affordable Housing Committee, okay? I'm saying this because this is this is a great concern to me, having people in their 20s in my family. Apparently 16% of Vermonters, that's not South Burlington, but 16% of Vermonters can afford to pay their mortgage on like a $400,000 home, $470,000 home. We are going to, in the next coming decade, see, I mean, you know, Chipotle can't stay open their full hours now because they can't staff enough people. They just can't entice people to work there. We're going to continue to see more people in the service industry who help all of us not be willing or able to take those low-paying jobs and live in a reasonable distance from those jobs in South Burlington. So I think we're going to see that dramatically in the next 10 years, whether it means we're creating an environment where people want to go have a community vision of going back into different types of work. I myself am thinking about that. To be part of a community, not based on going for the greatest income, but the most meaningful income to keep your community vibrant. So I guess I'm trying to say, I really feel that whatever we can do, you know, we say keep South Burlington affordable and community strong. I would question the keep there. And I think that we need to figure out ways to ensure we have diversity in our population, in our demographics, in our economic diversity, because we can't survive without that. It will be greatly harmed.
Well, you guys have covered it all. Nothing left to say. No. You know, I South Burlington's been my home since 1976, for the exception of 4 years in Colorado. So I've seen a lot of change. But when I read that first question, the two things that quickly came to my mind were climate change, obviously, and then housing. I think, Andrew, you hit it right on the head. We are going to have an incredible demand for people who want to live up here. We are a desirable place to live. What I think we really are going to have to work hard to do is not become an exclusive place to live, to Monica's point. And I think we're really going to have to be creative about, you know, meeting the goals of climate change, but also meeting the goals of housing too. We have a housing crisis where, I can speak to this from experience. It's hard to get people to take jobs. They don't have a place to live. Even rental, it's really tough. So we are going to have to get really creative. And that's, as the planning commission, that's our job, is to look at those really creative solutions and say, okay, how can we implement this? We may have to build in some places that we don't absolutely want to have to build in, but what's the best way we can do that and mitigate climate change? And then I would just ask my fellow commissioners, let's all be open to all the stakeholders in the community. We don't just represent one group, we represent the entire community. And I would just ask that everyone keep that in mind as we go forward.
We did it. Or we will do it, I guess. So I know that we are late. Well, we're actually still on agenda time, I suppose, but as some people have pointed out, our agenda was longer than normal tonight. So I do want to be cognizant of that. So what do you think? Do you want to get into the actual comp plan goals now? Or, yeah, Duncan?
I would ask that is it possible that we aim to do that next time? I do think that we should take care of Beta's street request.
Yes. Is that okay if we work on delving into the goals the next time? Now that we've kind of like each talked a little bit about what we're thinking. So on to the next item. I know you sent out the comp plan schedule. Is there anything you wanted to say, or should we just review that on our own?
This was really just to put it on the radar that it exists, that work is going to start in earnest at this next meeting, and you just did with this comp plan. And knowing that we're going to be talking about outreach with the climate action group on Thursday, I didn't want you to be behind the ball. So there's no real action tonight other than you got our memo on Friday. I think it'll officially be in your packet next time. So just laying the foundation for you.
And just as a quick note, there are some outreach components that make sense to combine with ARPA related outreach and climate action related outreach. So there are some pieces that are already in motion that may be launched before that next meeting, but it's, some online polling stuff and some initial outreach work to set up the very, very beginnings of the comp plan, just so everyone's aware and nobody's surprised if you see something pop up in city news or somewhere else, that is something that the ball has started rolling with.
And that pack you speak of, can you resend it to all of us tomorrow under the new?
Yes, I will give an
Thank you.
update under other business on that. But yes, thank you, Kelsey. That was helpful
Great.
to remind me.
Okay, so 10, review and approve street name requests from Beta Technologies. These are usually my favorite, but this one's been a little complicated. And I want to just thank Monica for your background information that you had sent, and staff for kind of sending by email the new recommendation, which is Da Vinci Drive, but I think it was spelled a little bit differently. Did you use a capital D?
I think
in your
that might have
recommendation?
been a just
Typo.
autocorrect in there.
Okay, so the actual recommendation continues to be
Well, that's their request.
your request.
That's Beta's top request.
Okay, so
Any of the three of them work.
go ahead, Michael.
I should let you finish.
I was gonna say the top of the list request is Da Vinci Drive.
I move that we approve Da Vinci Drive for the new street request by Beta Technologies.
Second.
Street name request by Beta Tech.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion from commissioners or the public? You have something to say in the public, you should turn on your mic or video. Anything up here? So just to be clear, it would still be spelled as it is in our packet, which is a small d, D-A, capital V-I-N-C-I drive.
Yes, unless for some reason the federal guidelines about road naming say that it has to be a capital. How about that?
That's fine.
There are very specific rules about how street signs have to be done. So if that says it has to be.
So amend the motion
We don't go against the feds.
to reflect that.
Okay, Paul?
Maybe we could continue this theme by having Galileo Way and Copernicus Court and things like that in our effort to establish ourselves as a tech center.
Although we'd like to fit a woman in there at some
Oh,
point.
that's right, too. Jury court.
Okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good. It is Da Vinci Drive. Thank you. And we have minutes from April 12 and April 26.
I move to approve the minutes of April 12th, 2022 and April 26th, 22 as written.
Okay, any discussion or comment? Second,
Need a
we need a second.
Second.
Also,
And Paul won the second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Andrew, you got to move fast here if you want to if you want to ever,
And Andrew abstained even though he did not need to.
but if you
so
ever want to
don't need
make
to
a
be
motion.
present to vote.
No, I mean, I abstained from April 12th because
I know you're allowed to abstain, but you're also allowed to vote for it, even though you weren't there. Just for future, just
we run fast.
And I'm just
But
teasing
noted
you
that
but
Andrew
about making motions, but you do have, if you do ever want to make a motion, you got to jump because that guy next to you,
I know, he's a
he's not
motion,
gonna, he
he's a
wants
motion
to,
maker.
he likes
Okay.
to make the motion.
So it sounds like staff has
Move things
something,
along.
something under other business.
Yep, just a quick item, to Monica's point earlier about sort of keeping you appraised of as things that the zoning administrator or DRB are seeing. We've seen a few instances where, as you know, in the last set of amendments to the land development regulations, you expanded the wetland buffers from 50 feet to 100 feet. It allows for lawns to continue to exist. However, if somebody wants to make a change to that, then it needs to go to the DRB. So just to note that we've had a handful of cases where backyards of folks where the neighborhood was built with, you know, the wetland being outside of the backyard, but now that the wetland buffer is further, goes fully into their backyard. So they come in to get a permit to expand their deck, and they've run into this, that it is now in a wetland buffer. And so they would either have to delineate it to demonstrate that it's not in it, or go to the DRB and demonstrate how they are mitigating their impact. So I'm just flagging it that for a future conversation as to affirming what the planning commission's goals were with that. So no discussion tonight, just flagging an item that we've seen a few of this spring already. Okay.
Okay. And you had something about the email
Email.
too?
Oh, yes. So as I mentioned a few weeks ago, we are migrating over to first initial last name at southburlingtonvt.gov. Their IT is ready to do it. They only held off because we didn't want to mess up anything before your packet tonight. So tomorrow you should, other than those who already were messed up with it, tomorrow everybody will switch over. The old one will continue to work. It should be seamless with you. But IT will be available to help you if you've got any problems with your phone or with your computer or any of those things. So it should be seamless, but just giving you a little heads up, there's been a couple of instances of gremlins in the system around the 180 users. So
Someone's always find me.
yeah.
I have a tech question.
Okay.
Has anyone been able to, or is there a way to add the city account to your local Outlook program so that, you know, like for me, it'd be easier to see all my email in one place rather than to remember to go on the web for the separate South Burlington email. So like I have my Outlook app and I have like 5 different email accounts already.
It should be able to do that because we are now in the Outlook app on our new email system.
Okay.
But let me put you directly in touch with IT so that it can get it set up to do exactly how you want to do it. Also, I'm not a tech person, so I could be wrong.
I think that's
Just
right.
play one
Oh,
on
probably
Tuesday
won't.
nights.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, anything else? Then we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Art Klugo says thank you to